Welcome to the Cyber Talent series, where we explore how organizations are closing skills gaps, accelerating onboarding, and building high-performing cybersecurity teams. My name is Phoebe DeVito. I'm joined by my co-host, Thomas Rogers, and today we are talking with Nick Berrie, Managing Director of Offensive Security Operations at Assura. So welcome, Nick. We're so happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, to start, do you mind just sharing a little bit with us about who you are and what you do now?
So, as you said, I'm Nick Berrie. So in my current role, I'm kind of responsible for everything from beginning to end when it comes to offensive security. So that is vulnerability management, penetration testing, occasional red team, purple team engagements, things like that. So I'm responsible for kind of designing those services, overseeing how service delivery goes, being kind of the subject matter expert when it comes to sales and onboarding. I'm also responsible for kind of the people management, so hiring talent, making sure that we're training to our standards, upholding those standards, developing talent, things like that. So it's everything from beginning to end. And then you get into all the businessy stuff like budget and helping marketing, like I said, sales and things like that most people listening to this probably are not interested in.
Awesome. Well, kind of in that vein, what is something that gets you really excited about your current role?
Probably the diversity of things that I get to do, which is probably also one of the most frustrating things, right? So having been kind of a pen tester for a few years prior to this, or prior to entering this role, I was used to, okay, you get put on an engagement, you do the thing, you write the report, you brief it out. You do the thing, you write the report, you brief it out. And then going into leadership, and especially as I take on more and more and more responsibility within the business, how that has changed. So I'm always doing something different. And I try to look at it now. I keep that hacker mindset of like, how can I make this more efficient? How can I kind of make this system work the way I want it to? But with people and processes and business rather than computers all the time. But I still like to keep my fingers on the keyboard. So
yeah, so I know we've talked a lot about now you being more in like the people manager role. You're obviously in touch with like what's going on technically and like how skilled your team is and what they're working on. But you obviously made a decision to be a people manager. I've heard you talk about that on other podcasts too. Could you just talk about like that decision and how that sort of impacted was that a hard decision? Do you miss being like an IC and kind of all that stuff?
So kind of getting into cybersecurity as a whole, a lot of it was probably driven by my upbringing, right? So we were not well-to-do. My mom had a lot of issues. My parents were divorced. And so growing up with her, I didn't know what success really looked like. And that's probably the nicest way to put it. And so getting into cybersecurity, a lot of it was for me. It was a lot about I and me and how am I going to be the best and how am I going to be successful and how am I going to prove everybody who doubted me wrong and become a success in life. And what does that mean to me? And so it was, again, very I-centric, all about what's Nick going to do and what's Nick going to achieve. And then a few years into that journey, I realized, one, I wasn't really the person I wanted to be. And two, I felt like I had reached this point where I was really into bug bounty for a while. And I was making really good money and I was working as a pen tester and I was doing all the things. And I was like, but this just still doesn't feel like what I thought it was going to feel like. I thought I would reach this pinnacle and things would change in my life. And so this is like, we're talking about life as a whole, not just, your career. And it just didn't feel right. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And so through a lot of introspection and talking with some wise people, essentially I realized it in the whole game of life, it just can't be about you. And so that's when I realized, okay, I've reached this, I've gone through this path and I've learned all these different things. Now, how can I give that to somebody else? How can I bring others up into the same kind of success that I've had? So, and I think we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when it comes to hiring, that's a lot of what I look for is I look for somebody who's got a chip on their shoulder and something to prove because typically people that come from those backgrounds, they will do whatever it takes. And I like that kind of work ethic and attitude about things. And that's a lot of where I came from. So that is kind of I tried to keep it abbreviated, not go into too much gory detail, but that's a lot of it for me. I made that decision consciously that it needed to stop being about me and start being about everybody else. And so that's my kind of perspective on leadership and
Yeah, super interesting. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Well, I think could you just break down like how do you like how specifically do you think about like helping people? I guess maybe start just more with like people like direct reports. Like how do you think about mentorship, even like the boring stuff like performance reviews? Like do you have like frameworks for the way you like think about helping your direct reports be successful?
yeah, I would say so. So I guess it depends a lot on which context we're talking about in their success, right? We work in a consulting field, so there's like a ton of different aspects to it. If you're doing pen testing or really any position and you're internal to a organization, the expectations and the tempo are going to be a lot different than if you're a consultant, where as a consultant, it's like super fast paced and crazy all the time. And constantly with different organizations and different people and changing expectations. The goalpost is moving a lot. So I look at people that report to me or even people that I've mentored or I was a, university professor for a while. I look at something called task level maturity. I don't try and judge somebody on the whole. I judge the specific thing that is occurring, right? So if we're looking at how do we make them a better pen tester, it's like, okay, well, what is the expectation of their role? Are they a network pen tester? Are they a web app? Are they a generalist? Are they supposed to be doing, some sort of hardware hacking? And so then we build, kind of a skills plan around that. And it may include using something like MetaCTF's platform, on-demand labs. It could be another platform like Hack the Box, offensive security, try Hackney, whatever it may be. Or it may be getting them hooked up with somebody who's really good at this, right? So just over the years and just the way this community is, you get to know people. And so I have no problem admitting I don't know everything. I'm good at many things, but probably not great at anything. And so I'm very much a generalist when it comes to things like that. And so if somebody wants to go deep down a rabbit hole on a specific topic, I may say, okay, I can get you set up with this individual and they can help you with, rising to that level. If it's more on the consulting side, then a lot of that is getting somebody in front of people and getting them experiences, right? And so getting them set up with those and introducing them to unique scenarios and challenges that they haven't seen before. So when it comes to like the training, it just kind of, I hate that answer, but it just kind of depends on what they need. And then tailoring it to, like I said, where they're at in their journey. They might be really good at one thing and just not great at another. Well, we have to, if we're going to raise that one thing up, then that's what we're going to focus on. We're not judging them on the whole. It's that specific task that they are trying to develop, right? And then when it comes to feedback, like the way that I do things is, again, depending on where someone is in their career journey, that task level maturity and the role, typically either weekly or bi-weekly, like one-on-ones. Somebody early on in their career typically wants weekly feedback. If not even, obviously if there's an opportunity for feedback, I give it immediately. But typically they want that feedback and coaching on a more frequent basis. They want to know they're moving in the right direction to help build that confidence up. Somebody who's been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, maybe they only need to talk every 2 weeks and maybe they don't even want to talk that often. But depending on where they're at in their career journey, those one-on-ones may be steered more by me, where I'm helping because they just don't know where they need to go, where I'm helping shape those conversations and how they're developing and say, okay, here's where I see your career going. do you see your career going this way? And if they say yes, then we develop a plan together. Whereas if someone's more mature in their career, I say, what do you want to get out of this? And I let them steer the conversation. So if we're having a one-on-one, like I have a senior pen tester on our team right now. He's been doing this for like 15 years. He steers the one-on-one. I'm like, this is your meeting, dude. You tell me what I can do to help you be successful, and I will do whatever I can to help you with that. And if I see something, I'll bring it up. But he doesn't need me telling him every little thing. He's got it. So I'm really just there to support and give him what he needs to move to whatever level he wants on the next phase of his journey.
How do you balance, especially, I guess, thinking about maybe the less experienced people where you need to guide them and kind of hold them accountable to their development plans that you sort of co-create with them? How do you think about balancing them getting the on the job experiences? And I'm sure that's very driven by like what you or whomever is staffing them on, and like reaching for the out of, external opportunities to develop and, learn new skills. Like how do you balance between, getting them those opportunities and then, talking them through the year and like holding them accountable to doing what they said they wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, I'm very clear about this because the reality of it is you can hold someone accountable in the sense that there's some sort of penalty for them not doing something, right? It's the whole, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So I can certainly give you an incentive to achieve your goals, whether that be, we pay for your training or you get some sort of monetary compensation or like a day off or something like that. Like, let's celebrate the win. And then we can support you along the way, meaning you get the resources you need. Again, if I don't have it, I'll find someone who does, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, we're all the CEOs of our own career, right? And so if you want to be successful, a lot of like juniors that come in, maybe they don't have a certification. Everybody wants the OSCP, right? or PNPT, or Hack the Box's new certifications like CPTS. They want the new shiny cert because they want to prove that they can do pen testing, right? Cool. I can't be there while you're doing it. I can certainly support you as you have questions about something you've never encountered before, or how is this used in the real world, and maybe we get you exposure to that over the course of time. But at the end of the day, you got to do the work. And so I'm very clear with everybody. You own the outcome. This I'm very big on ownership, and that I make it very clear to everybody that these are your goals and not my goals. I will support you in whatever way I can so that you can achieve your goals, but they are yours. They're not mine. And so my goal may be to get you to achieve your goals, but therein lies that we're very tied to one another, and you have to hold up your end of the bargain. So that's a lot of it. I like to talk a lot of new people, especially people early in careers in general, right? A lot of us vastly overestimate what we can achieve in a year. So, unless you've lived a year as an adult, or at least quite a few years as an adult, a lot of young people coming into their career, they're like, I'm going to get this done, this done, this done, and this done all this year, and I'm going to work, and I'm going to start working on starting a family and all this stuff. And it's like, you're probably not. And so we kind of have to temper expectations, and I help them figure out, okay, if you're going to do this, how much time are you going to have to spend every night working on whatever this thing is, right? Well, I think I can carve out 30 minutes, 4 times a week. It's like, okay. So you're going to take 2 hours once a week, or 2 hours over the course of a week. How many hours do you think it's going to take you to get through all this course material? Like, I don't know, maybe 80 hours. Okay, we'll do the math on that, and then add up all the other things that you think you're going to accomplish this year. Do you think you can really do that? Because you don't want to let yourself down, right? I think that shoot for the stars, but also be realistic, right? So it's a lot of just having all these conversations about resources, intent, what's the ultimate goal? Why are we doing this? Why do you want to achieve this? And then setting those expectations and kind of helping them work the plan. But at the end of the day, it's their goal.
Got it. No, that's awesome. So I guess kind of continuing that, because like we've already talked about, how to, evaluate a little bit, like how to plan for the year, how to build out the, sort of like what's the year going to look like, and how do I chart my growth? But like, in your opinion, just like what, this is a very broad question for you, but like what makes a good red teamer?
Somebody who never wants to stop learning. That's really it. I think it does also matter a little bit on what the expectations of the role are, right? So we talk a lot these days, especially in the consulting space where I'm at, talk a lot about soft skills, right? So I say never stop learning. I don't just mean technically, right? That could be human interactions. It could be how to write a better report. It could be how to gain efficiency inside of a process. It's taking that hacker mindset and kind of applying it everywhere you possibly can. How can I always make this more efficient, better? Hack the process, right? And so I think that for me is the biggest thing. So when I'm talking to somebody that I'm looking to add to our team, it's, what do you do on your time off, right? And so are you passionate about what you do for a living? And you don't have to be. Really, for me, I like to see somebody who's passionate about anything, right? Because if you can be passionate about something, then you can bring that energy into other things, typically. So a lot of it is just having that passion for learning. And if you can bring that into work, you'll be great.
I love that. And one thing it's making me think of is I think there's this kind of narrative. I used to be in the consulting space, and like I think a narrative that came up a lot in interviewing and hiring is the idea that like, oh, well, you can't teach soft skills. So
Yeah.
like if there's a lack of soft skills, like, it's a lot. That's a totally different conversation than if maybe someone doesn't have a cert but needs to get that cert. And so I'm curious, like what, obviously that's kind of theoretical and I think it's case by case, but I'm curious kind of your approach to like considering soft skills in that way during the interviewing process. And then also like, how do you go about working with someone on upskilling in kind of that realm?
Typically on the soft skills side, again, it comes back to that kind of what's the role and what's that task level maturity expectation. So if the person's role is going to be super technical and they're really never going to talk to anybody, then I'm going to, one, make sure that they can actually do the technical piece they say they can. And then can you articulate it in a report? It's like, okay, cool. We'll keep you behind the scenes and you can just be a wizard back there. But if you're going to face clients, then you need to be able to talk to them. You need to be able to empathize with them. You need to be able to, have strategic conversations with them beyond technical. And so that's a big thing that we see is, especially early on in a career, individuals are super excited to tell you about this new whiz-bang exploit that they pulled off. And so they're sitting there talking to maybe executives or a room full of people that just, they don't have that technical knowledge. And so they're going way deep down the rabbit hole on how this exploit works. And so I have to pull them back a little bit. I'm like, okay, hey, think about who you're talking to. They don't have any clue. Explain this like you're explaining it to your grandmother, right? Or to a child. And so a lot of it is just that coaching. And I try to do that a lot of times. The way that I do it is, if I know someone's never gone into a situation, then we'll role play it ahead of time. Like, hey, I'm going to grab a couple people. We're going to sit here or even if it's just me, we'll go through the call together ahead of time. And I'm going to try and throw you off balance by just asking questions based off of what you're saying to me, based off what I've seen clients do in the past, right? And so they get exposure to that in a safe environment. Then typically when they first go into any of those in situations like doing their first debrief, I don't throw them in front of a client that I know is going to shred them apart. It's like, let's dip our toes in the water and I'll pick somebody that, hey, we've worked with them for a long time. They know us, we know them. And so I know that they're going to be able to even sometimes help coach them. Because they'll say, that's not what I needed. I need to hear this. And so when they hear it from the client, that individual goes, oh my God. And they're like, okay, I need to re-explain this to them. And then after a call, after they've gotten done doing a debrief or having a kickoff call or whatever it may be, I'll say, how do you think that went? And I let them go down the rabbit hole and do kind of the self-analysis piece. And that also helps me understand as a leader, where are they at? Here's where I think they are, right? Do they think they're lower or higher? Or are we actually meeting and we actually think they're on the same level? Because ideally, we want to get as much parity as we can in our opinions of their performance. And so if they're way off and I'm way off, we got to go, okay, what's going on here? So looking at that after the call, having them do some self-analysis, and then I give them my critiques and feedback and say, okay, here's how I would approach this. Don't say this, say this, that kind of thing. And we just continue that cycle over and over again. If things don't start clicking, that's when we have to start saying, okay, why is this not working out? Is this, is it something that you may never be able to get to this level and we need to find a way for you to be in a purely technical role and you're not talking to people on a regular basis? Or is there something else at play here, right? And so again, it's just kind of meeting individuals where they're at and then trying to get them where they need to go, but understanding that everybody's different. Some people take to it like fish in water and some don't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that breakdown. So we talked a little bit about like the kind of qualities of a person that you look for in the interview process, or like, when you're taking someone onto a team. I'm curious, at kind of the like resume level, is there any particular background experience that you have found to be really valuable?
In the consulting space, specifically, if they've already been a consultant and I can see that they've demonstrated success somewhere, or if they're coming into this consulting space new and they come from like maybe early on in their work life, they worked in retail where they had to deal with people a lot. And if you've ever worked in retail, it's the worst kind of people most of the time, right? For me, it was coming out of kind of corrections and physical security at a nuclear plant where I was dealing with people in de-escalating situations all the time. So I was constantly having to navigate these weird interactions with individuals, or violent individuals in some cases, angry. And so seeing somebody coming in when it comes to like the soft skills and the human interaction piece, if they've already done it successfully somewhere else, or if they've done it in a different manner with a different role in a different career, and seeing if they can adapt that. And so that's a lot of what I look for when it comes to kind of soft skills is, can you do this? If somebody's brand new to a career, then a lot of that I'll just try and suss out during the interview. We do an individual interview with myself just to get a good feel of, do we even want to pursue this individual? And then we'll do like a panel interview. And typically during a panel interview over the course of an hour, the wheels either fall off or they stay on. And so that's a good way to kind of figure out, okay, you put this individual in front of people they've never met before. What are they going to say? How are they going to interact? How are they going to react to questions? How are they going to react when they don't know the answer to the question? Are they going to admit it? Are they going to ask, hey, can I Google that real quick? Go for it, or are they going to BS you? And you don't want that person because you don't ever want them to do that in front of a client, right? And so there's a couple different ways that we kind of suss those things out.
I think you're in a really interesting position. We've talked a lot about, like you and I have talked a lot about like certifications in the past,
Yeah.
and like what's good, what's not good, what does it even indicate really? Like,
Yeah.
But in your line of work, like you often like have to hire people with certifications because
Yep.
that's sort of like what you're selling. And so how do you realize in some cases it's like a requirement, so you gotta it kind of helps you to like narrow the candidate pool, I assume, but at the same time you got to do your own diligence on like, do they they have the certification, does that mean that they can do the job? Does that
Yeah.
mean, and technically speaking too, like what does that mean technically about them? So yeah, can you just get as philosophical as you want, but can you just talk about certifications?
Yeah. I know you and I have had many long conversations about some of that and the direction the field's gone. For me, I look at certifications when I'm looking at a resume. Obviously, I think, and everyone does and should, right? I don't probably put that much weight on it, especially if you've been in the field. If I've got somebody like, I know I won't name names, but I know a handful of people that have been doing this far longer than I have and are way better at it than I am. And they have no schooling and no certifications. And so it's like,
And way more money than us.
yeah, right. And so, when I see an individual who's made a career out of something and they don't have the certifications, but they've demonstrated that level of excellence, it's like, okay, that you don't really have to ask too much. Someone early on in their career, certifications are super important, right? It's the only way you can kind of demonstrate any sort of expertise. And so for me, having a certification that was hands-on is the biggest thing. I want to know, not that you know this in theory, I want to know that you know it in practice. And I love that the industry has really started to shift that way, right? 10 years ago, there was only a handful of certs where you could demonstrate hands-on experience. Back in the day, everyone was getting CEH, and I never pursued it. I never really entertained anybody who had as their core certification, because it wasn't really a knowledge-based exam. Same thing, a lot of new people coming in will go after Security Plus. It's great. You should have the knowledge. But when it comes to a hands-on keyboard type role, whether that be a SOC analyst, whether it be a pen tester, whether it be, you name it, threat hunter, DFIR analyst, whatever, demonstrating that you can do the thing is really important early on in your career. And so certificates like I said earlier, OSCP, the CPTS, the PNPT, all of those certifications where you have shown somebody that I can put my hands on a keyboard, I can execute a pen test to a certain degree, and then I can write a report that means something to somebody. That's really important. And so I value those things, but I also really like to see, again, what's your portfolio of work outside of that? Are you participating in CTFs? Have you given talks? Do you keep a blog? Do you have a GitHub repo? Like, show me everything you're doing. And you don't have to do it all, right? We're all human. We only have time for so much. But if somebody's got like a YouTube channel or something like that, it's like, cool. Let me see what you're doing, and see how passionate you are about this. And that really gets me jazzed up more than just seeing a list of certifications. I mean, my list continues to grow, and I don't know that it makes all that big a difference to me. It might make a big difference to somebody who's reading my resume, but for me, it's like, it's more about the knowledge that you're gaining and the practical skills that you're gaining, not the piece of paper.
Yeah, and I feel like also just the it expresses like the what you said earlier, but like the desire to continuously
Yeah.
learn. Like like their activity speaks louder than whatever they can write on their
100%.
resume. It's like, yeah, if they're interested in it, then it'll come through just by all the
Yeah.
things they're doing. So yeah, I mean, I think on the we talked about, and I think you and I are like super aligned on like the best way to evaluate talent. There's no one thing that's gonna be the center of everything. It's a holistic evaluation. And so yeah, like when you're thinking about like evaluating skills, do you have like a process or a framework about? You mentioned like the panel discussion. I'm sure that's really like illuminating as
Yep.
to what does a person actually know. But yeah, can you just talk about that?
Yeah. So early on, we didn't do this because I didn't want to fall down the rabbit hole of making people jump through so many hoops. But we've gotten to this point in the industry, unfortunately, where everybody wants to be in some fancy role, right? And I get it. I wanted to be in one too. But unfortunately, especially with the rise of AI, you have a lot of people that just lie, and they'll say they have skills or they say they have talent, they don't. And unfortunately, we had to start testing to find out. So a lot of our interview process to figure out, can you actually do this to a certain degree, right? That initial interview, that's just getting to know each other, me asking some questions about the individual, them asking questions about me and the role and the company. Then we go into a panel. The panel interview, we start looking at kind of pillars of excellence, in terms of consulting, in terms of soft skills, cultural fit, technical acumen, just verbally back and forth. Like, we'll just ask some basic questions and see, how do you articulate an answer to that? From there, if we all feel good about that, everyone who participates in the panel, then we go to a skills assessment, like a hard skills assessment, where we have a basically a simulated enterprise environment, and we drop them in for a week. They don't have to use a whole week. Some people finish it in a day. We ask you to go in, find a couple vulns, and write a quick report on it. That way we can actually see in an environment that you've not seen before, can you go in and find meaningful vulnerabilities and articulate them in a report? And that tells us a lot. We've had people go into that environment and they spend a couple days in it and they come back and they go, I need to withdraw myself from this process. Like, okay, we would have bet on that person because verbally they gave some really great answers. On paper, they had some really good answers, but then they found, hey, I really couldn't do this. And that's fine. And we've also had people go through it and just the quality of the writing or the quality of the findings just not really anything that we would have expected or is not to the expectations that we have. And so having a hands-on assessment, I think, has become a necessity to some degree. And I know that's like a huge argument within the industry. It certainly isn't like on par with the leak code assessments that you hear from like those big FANG companies, right? I just ask you to go in the environment, find 3 vulns that you find interesting, and give me a report on them.
How do you set up that environment, and how is it something that you are like refreshing periodically, or how'd you set it up?
It's a totally virtualized environment hosted in AWS. It gets generated on a per user basis, so there's nobody else in there with you. It's just your own environment. Then we give somebody like a VPN access to get into the environment, and they can do as much as they want. Like I said, we give people a week. Some people get really into it. They're just like, let me show you everything I can do. I like that. Other people, they go with the rules. The rules say, hey, get me 3 vulns and write a report, and that's all they do, and that's fine. But it's cool when somebody's like, I'm having a good time in here. Can you let me continue? So that's fun. In terms of refreshing it, we didn't create the environment, but we do occasionally go in and we'll add machines to it. Or change vulnerabilities or configurations around inside of it. So we also use this environment as our own test bed. So like when we want to test a new exploit or something like that, or test a new technology, new tool set, and we want to do it in a safe environment, it's a good way to go in there and hop in and have like a quasi enterprise environment. It's got Splunk plugins and all sorts of stuff in it as well. So our SOC team, if they want to get involved, they can come in and actually watch and see what we're doing and go into the Splunk dashboard and watch activities. It's got some open source EDR tools in there. And so it's a cool purple team environment that we can play around in.
Yeah. Sounds cool. Multi-purpose environment.
Yeah.
That's great. So you just mentioned this wasn't on question list, but I kind of, we spent over half an hour and haven't talked about AI. There's so many like AI pen testing, red teamer tools out there. And I think there's a lot of, debate obviously about like what's the future going to look like. But yeah, do you have an opinion on that? Like in your field, like what does AI do to your line of work?
So the first piece, AI tools are here. They work, right? I don't think replace anybody. That's not what I would like to see, and we'll get to that. Where I have seen the ones that I've used and the ones that we've tested and demoed and things like that, there are some that are really good. There are some that are super capable tools that are a perfect addition to someone's tool set. I am very clear in saying they're an addition to someone's tool set, not a replacement for people. And I think that's really where I see AI going inside of that offensive security space. I think it increases efficiency, it increases consistency, it can help with those mundane tasks, the repeatable things, the known knowns that we can go out and test for. And that's where AI is really good, right? It's when you start to get into some of the more bespoke testing. Like I saw Expo post recently that's been shaking up the world, and I think if you read their actual blog post, you begin to realize, okay, it wasn't just AI. There was a lot of people involved with this. But Expo is a new web application pen testing tool that's driven by AI, and it became #1 on some bug bounty program. I don't know which one. But so their article came out, and for the first time, AI is #1 in the United States on HackerOne or whatever it might be. That's awesome. It's still not a replacement for people. If you go read their blog article, it's like, hey, there was a whole team of people validating the findings that were coming in and then making sure the POCs were correct and all this stuff. It's like, okay, that's the truth of the matter, is it can help you. It will not replace you. And I don't know that we'll ever get there. I'm not bullish or even have the desire to see AI replace people. My hot take on all the layoffs that we've been seeing recently is that probably in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see those companies having to backfill because they are going to realize that the AI could only do so much and that it didn't actually replace the humans behind it. And so I put a post on LinkedIn the other day about AI is artificial intelligence. It's not artificial wisdom. Can't walk in our shoes. And so there's all of these nuanced pieces to being a human and living a life and interacting with individuals like yourselves on this podcast that AI just can't do. It can mimic and parrot things that it's been taught, and it can learn to a degree, but again, only with the information that we're providing it. And I don't know that any new creative thought will ever come out of it. I don't know that that will ever happen. I'm not an AI guru, but I just don't see that in our lifetimes, or at least not in the near future, happening. So that's my opinion on the tooling. It's augmentation, not replacement. With that, I think that philosophically we get into this issue of the gatekeeping and barrier to entry to cybersecurity is already bad. And so if we use AI to do all of these entry-level tasks and we never bring anybody in to learn how to do them, or maybe even just learn how to manage the AI tools, right? How do you get that next generation? Because someday we're all going to want to retire. And we're not, or we will die working. Who's going to replace us if we pull the ladder up behind us and there's nobody there to do the job? Is it just going to be the AI? And if it only reaches a certain level, then are we diminishing the capacity of everything over time? Because there's eventually just that knowledge gap that will never be filled. And so I think anyone in a leadership position has a duty to understand that you can't pull the ladder up behind you. You still have to bring people in. You still have to train them. You still have to bring them up to the level that they need to be, so that they can surpass the AI, right? And I think that is something we're seeing across the industry. That's a big frustration with people that are getting laid off, people that are trying to get into the industry, things like that, is that people are using AI to replace the human, and I don't want that. I shouldn't say nobody wants that. I'm sure somebody does, clearly. But it's not something that I see in our future.
It's always interesting to see the companies that like do a big layoff but without like a hiring freeze. It's basically like they're like continuing to hire, but they do a layoff. But hopefully all that stuff stabilizes. I know it causes like a lot of stress with everyone. But this has been awesome, Nick. I mean, I feel like we could go for another hour, but we won't. So I know Phoebe has like one kind of wrap up question that we typically do.
Yeah, awesome. So the question for you is, if you were starting your career in cyber now, what's one thing that you would tell yourself?
Like I entered in a boom in the market, so it wasn't that difficult, and I see the difficulty people are entering now. And I think if I were to be in that same situation, it would be just don't give up. And I think that probably harkens back to like everything I was saying leading up to this, where I like people that are driven. I like people that have a reason and a why for why they're doing something. And finding that and sticking with it and not giving up, that's probably the biggest thing, I think, in today's world that we're in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, of course.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Cyber Talent Series. If you enjoyed the combo, make sure to subscribe on Spotify. Also follow us on YouTube and subscribe there. We'll be sharing content there as well. For ongoing tips on hiring, retaining, and upskilling your cyber workforce, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and check us out at MetaCTF.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.